my guest today is a dear friend. I've known her and her husband for over 25 years in Messianic Jewish ministry, and she has written a wonderful book called Refined by Fire, and God really ministered to her in a time of great trial, and she turned tragedy into triumph. Would you welcome my dear friend Patty Juster? Patty, welcome. Patty, I don't think that most of the people watching necessarily understand what Messianic Jewish ministry is. Just introduce yourself, talk about how you got involved in reaching Jewish people along with your husband, Dan.
Well, actually, this year, my husband and I will be 39 years in the ministry.
Wow, congratulations. 39 years.
And I was just 22 years old, and my husband was 24 when we took our first church, which was called the First Hebrew Christian Presbyterian Church. So my husband was, first of all...
Wait. A Hebrew Christian Presbyterian church?
That's correct.
That's a mouthful.
Yes, it is.
Presbyterians that have a Hebraic, that's unique. I remember
it was
that.
a mission outreach.
Right.
And many of the older leaders today had their beginnings in Chicago in this mission organization that was led by the Presbyterian Church. And back at that time, we used a Presbyterian hymnal with a Jewish star in front. Mm-hmm. And we met on Sunday. And being Jewish was like a picture on a wall. Wasn't something that we did or that we were. It was like a memory. We used to do this. We used to do Passover. We used to practice some of the other feasts. But what changed is that my husband began to ask questions, and other people began to ask questions about, does it mean that when we come to faith as a Jew that we stop being Jewish? Do we have to become Gentile? It's very interesting. Acts chapter 15, there was some conflict that had to be resolved. Like, what do you do with all these Gentiles that come to faith? Do they have to become Jewish? But now we're asking the opposite question. When a Jewish person comes to faith, now do they become Gentile? Do they stop being Jewish?
It's exactly the opposite of Acts 15, right? The confusion.
Right.
And the consternation was, what do we do with these Gentiles that are getting saved? This is a Jewish Messiah.
Right.
And now it's, what do we do with these Jews, right?
Exactly.
And so you faced that issue in 1972.
We had to face the issue, and my husband did a lot of research and talked with other people who came to the conclusion that Jewish people who come to faith in Yeshua are still Jewish, and they're called upon to keep their Jewish heritage and to honor their father and mother. And so in doing research, and my husband began to write some books. I think Jewishness in Jesus was his first book, and then Jewish Roots, and then Growing to Maturity. He's written many books.
All famous books in our circle.
Right.
In our circle.
Right.
But 39 years, and you've seen God do amazing things.
Amazing things.
Yeah.
It just, my husband and I, we wouldn't look at ourselves as being visionary. We just see an open door, go through it, and we're just in awe at what God does. It's not like we say, well, let's start a movement or let's be part of it or whatever. We just see an open door and then we go through it. And it's amazing how God has just prospered this ministry. And when we moved from Chicago to Washington, D.C., we were leaders of Beth Messiah congregation for 22 years. And out of that came a ministry called Tikkun Ministries International. And this is a ministry that oversees 15 to 20 congregations. I'm not sure, because it's continuing to growing. And we also is a sending agent that sends out many emissaries in different parts of the world. And we live half a year in Israel.
Wonderful. Well, Patty, I want to focus in on a portion of your life. You actually went through a great tragedy a number of years ago. You had 3 children, and then you raised 3 children, and then later on, after a gap, you had another child, a 4th child.
Actually, we had 2 children that were 2 years apart. And then 7 years later, we had 2 other children.
Okay, so that was the gap.
That was the gap.
So 2 and 2.
Right.
And one of them had there was a real tragedy. Talk about that tragedy.
Back in 1981, I had a prophetic dream. By this time, I was having several different word of knowledge prophetic dreams that were very, very accurate about people who were going to be healed and situations. And I had a dream that from the Lord that I was going to have a son. And the Lord told me what his name was going to be, Samuel Peter Shmuel Kepha, and that what his calling would be, that he would be a prophetic evangelist. And I saw him ministering in front of multitudes, and the Lord said none of his words would fall to the ground. And then the Lord gave me a charge to watch over the word, to watch over this word. And so at that time, my husband only wanted 2 children. We had 2 children, and he wanted 0 population control. You know, that's it, you know. And, you know, part of the hippies, you know, just 2 kids, 2.1. And so when I told my husband the dream, he says, nothing doing. We're only going to have 2 children. But, you know, God has his ways. And in 80, I guess it was 83, I got pregnant. And I thought it was Samuel because my dreams are never wrong. So I kept calling this baby Samuel, Samuel. And then this is before they did a lot of sonograms. So I didn't know the sex of my child. So when the child was born, my husband said it was a girl. And I go, no, look again. Can't be.
You had to be shocked. We did an ultrasound before Liel was born, and we were told it was a boy.
Oh, no.
So I even announced in the magazine another rabbi is coming on the scene.
Oh, no.
And then we did an ultrasound weeks later, and the technologist said, you know what gender, right? We said, yeah, boy. She said, wrong, a girl. And we were just in shock. Of course, Liel's a beautiful daughter. I love her dearly. We're so happy. But what a shock. So you must have been absolutely
I was
shocked.
shocked because my dreams are just not wrong, and I knew this dream was from the Lord. So, and that was a beautiful little girl named Simcha, and it was so wonderful because when I saw her, I just burst out into tears of joy. I didn't have a girl's name picked out, and Simcha means joy, and so 2 years later I got pregnant again, and it turned out to be Samuel, and it was just such a thrill. And when he was 1 year old, he came down with something called viral myocarditis. And it's a life-threatening illness, and he was in the hospital, and the doctors did not expect him to live. And we had worldwide prayer going for him. And Mike Brown was actually there, and he got a word from the Lord that God was going to heal him because there was only a small percentage chance that he would live and not die. And, you know, we were standing in faith because of this dream, but he had to fulfill his calling. So God completely restored his heart. His heart was like paper thin, and the doctor said it's impossible for that enlarged heart to get back to normal. But that heart did. God did heal. God touched him, and he grew up and until about age 12. And so that's very important to give you this background because when the fire took place, you know, it was the night before. My husband and I were at a meeting, and the power went out in our house. And my son went to spend the night at the neighbor's house. And when we came home from the meeting, we found out he was spending the night, and the power was still out. And we were trying to decide, should we go over and bring him back home or what? And I began to think, I wonder if they blew out the candles. And then I began to be concerned. I said, should I go over there? But the parents were there, the teenagers, they should be smart enough to know to blow out the candles. And so I was trying to pray, and I said, God, should I go over and should I not go over? And I said, no, God, I choose to trust you. Because I was asking God for this mother worry, this the Holy Spirit warning me. And I said, I made a conscious decision, I choose to trust you. And of course, the next morning, the neighbor came pounding on the door and shouting that there was a fire. And we quick threw some clothes on, went next door, and the fire was ablaze. There was 5 boys sleeping in the basement, 2 neighborhood boys and 3 boys that were the sons of the owner. And I went into the fire trying to rescue him, but it was too much smoke, too much fire. And it was just such a feeling of helplessness being out there. And by this time, the firemen came and 3 boys were rescued, and Samuel was taken out of the house, and he was not breathing, and they started doing resuscitation, and I began to make a call to the prayer chain, and then an elder came over shortly after he got that prayer request, because it was early in the morning still. It's like maybe 6 o'clock in the morning. And it was quite a shock being outside that house and feeling so helpless that, and almost feeling like he's gone. It's impossible.
Patty, as a father, I can't even comprehend this. It's just gut-wrenching.
Yes, it was amazing, though, that there's something that God puts in within the human body, like a natural Novocaine. And I know there's a lot of grace from God, but I think there's also something that kicks in. So you start doing heroic things. And Dan and I went around and prayed for the other children that were laying on the ground. And we went and started praying for the other parents. And this is all while they were working on our son. And then they took him to the hospital. And what was quite amazing is that when he finally arrived at the children's hospital, they said that he was brain dead. But he was on life support system, and we had 40 to 80 people came to the hospital. They had to set aside a whole wing of their hospital for people to worship and to pray. Since we had this dream and we had this miracle when he was just 1 year old, we just thought this was another attack on his life. And so this is why we were standing in faith.
So like Abraham, who believed that even if he sacrificed his son, he'd come back.
Right.
You had every reason to believe that
we fully believed that he would fulfill his destiny.
Yeah.
Yes, and so we were believing that. But after 2 days, they said that we had to take him off life support, and that was a very dark time. And I remember laying on the floor, looking at our friends. They were with us for 48 hours. I mean, it was quite a vigil. I mean, it was just amazing. And I was crying. And I said, here we have 40 to 80 people sitting vigil with us, praying with us, and Yeshua couldn't get his disciples to wait 1 hour during his darkest hour. And I just felt like, whoa, here, 48 hours. All our friends were there just praying with us, standing with us.
Hetty, what happened when the realization hit he's gone?
When you go through a tragedy like this, you have to go through it in several different levels. It affects your body, soul, and spirit. I had to walk through it as a mother, and had to walk through it as a leader's wife, and theologically, trying to grapple with some of these issues, especially since I was given this prophetic dream, and God is not a man that he can lie, so what's up? So as a mother, coming home from the hospital and from the funeral service, it's coming home to an empty room. It's when it comes time to setting the table, you start setting out 6 plates and there's one missing. Wait a minute, he's not there. And cleaning up the toys that he last played with. These are just, different issues that mother goes through, and eventually packing up the room, the clothes, the smells, everything like that. And so I had to work through that as a mother. And then to work through the theological questions of why, God, you promised, you gave me this dream, and you raised him from the dead when he was 1 year old. And now why did you take him? And was it, whose fault was it? And then, one of the things you wrestle with after something like this happens is whose fault was it? Was it my fault? Did there some sin in my life? Was it really God trying to warn me and my husband to bring him back from that house? And there's all these questions that come up.
Patty, you wrote a book called Refined by Fire about this experience. Why did you call it Refined by Fire, and why did you write a book about it?
Okay, first of all, the name of my book I was going to originally call it Treasures in Darkness. But when it came time to publish the book, my publisher suggested a different name. And as this book most of it was written a year after Samuel died. And the remainder of it was written over the last, I would say, 11 years. And it just became quite obvious in wrestling through some of these issues, even to the last chapter, is that how do you reconcile the Word of God with the tragedy that you're in? I couldn't read Psalm 91 for a long time. Whenever I tried to read it, I would choke up because it talks about God's protection, and His angels surrounding you and being, just His security. He dwells in the shelter of the Most High, and about, plague or, disease or disaster, coming in, not touching you. And so how do you resolve that? And so that is the refiner's fire, because what I found is that there is no answer. You can't figure it out. What I realized that there is a torment of the knowledge of good and evil. When you try to figure out, just like in the book of Job, there's a torment in trying to figure out good and evil, in blame and cause and effect, and there's no comfort in that. Somehow you feel like when you're going through a hard time that you can find comfort if you can find out why, or find out who, or other kind of things.
Why do you want to put it into a book?
Okay, when a year after Samuel died, this was a year that we were going to have him bar mitzvahed in Israel. We were on a prayer journey there. This was just incredible. We were on our way to the Dead Sea. John Dawson was with us and others, part of this prayer journey. And on the way there, the Lord said, "Now, Patty, I want you to start writing. Start writing the story now." So I start writing, because we're on the way to Dead Sea, and the Dead Sea is the lowest point of the earth. And going through this was really my low point of my life. And I started to write about my history in this first part of my book, and wrote about how my mother lost a son in a car accident, and the different things that she went through, and how she would say, "I wish I were dead." And so I was writing this. And when I got to the restaurant, I couldn't go up to the top of the mountain because I was suffering from heart problems as a result of the tragic loss of our son. And so what happened is that as I was writing, I was feeling sicker and sicker. And I had to, when I finished that first chapter, I ran to the bathroom, and I got sick, and I sat back down at the restaurant shaking, saying, "God, I know something else is going on. This is not food poisoning. It's not because I've got a virus. What is taking place?" And what is so interesting is that the prayer team was on top of Masada dealing with the suicide issue, the death wish that was on top, that was in the people to protect themselves from the coming army. They threw themselves, Israelis threw themselves over the edge and committed suicide. And so when I was sitting down in the restaurant, John Dawson comes running into the restaurant. He says, "Patty, stand up." He said, "The Spirit of the Lord came on me when I was on top of the mountain, and I ran all the way down, and I've got a message from the Lord for you." And he looks at me, and he points his finger right at me. He says, "Patty, life is a gift. Life is a gift." And so God was dealing with me about that death wish, because when someone dies that's very close, you want to go into the grave with the person. There's like a gravitational pull, and you just want to die, because it's the only way you know to get rid of all that pain.
Especially the heart of a mother.
Right. And it's just like, even though you have other children that you want to live for, it's like if you smash your thumb and it's really hurting, you're not being grateful for your other fingers that are not hurting. You're just devastated, over the loss, and it's wrenching. And one of the main lessons that I learned going through this is what death is and what life is. You think that death is just when somebody, dies physically. And what I came to understand is that there is a worse death, and that is people who are walking around like zombies, who are unable to connect to other people in bonds of love and in intimacy and fellowship. So there's many walking dead. So I came to understand that real death means separation. And the only real death is when we are separated from Yeshua, from God, if we do not have faith. And that is the permanent death, the second death, when you're assigned to permanent separation from God in hell. And I realized that is the worst pain, is separation, it's divorce, it's it's betrayal, it's these other things. It's when what you do is that you try to protect yourself from future pain. And this is what I found. One of the lessons I learned is that if I tried to resist the grief and the mourning, then it would shut myself off from feeling joy. We don't understand that. We think that by protecting ourselves, that we're going to protect ourselves from pain, when we're actually protecting ourselves from life and from joy.
Amen. Well, Patty, I'm so glad you wrote this book, and you're a woman of faith, a woman of courage, and we all appreciate you so much, and thank you for being on the program. Patty Juster, everyone. This book, Refined by Fire, A Grieving Mother Finds Treasures Hidden in Darkness, is for everyone who's been through a life-altering tragedy, whether it's the loss of a child like Patty, or it could be the loss of something or someone very, very important. You know, this is a book about faith in the midst of the storm. God said he'd be with us in the fire like the 3 Hebrew children, not take us out of the fire, but be in the fire with us. So I really want to get this book into your hands because I believe it will change your life. So you need to read it, even if you haven't been through a tragedy, because faith comes by hearing, and faith is built up as you realize that you can overcome anything. So here's how you can get your own copy.
Refined by Fire is Patty Juster's intensely personal account of the devastating loss of her 12-year-old son Samuel in a tragic house fire, and her subsequent journey of faith, healing, hope, and renewal. Sharing thoughts from her heart that few mothers are willing to reveal, Patty explains how, with God's help, she coped with this loss and experienced emotional and spiritual healing through the comforting embrace of Jesus. All of us have gone through hard times and tragedies, and this book will help you find treasures in the darkness, God's amazing grace and faithfulness in sorrow, and His abiding presence which leads to peace that passes all understanding. Patty Juster's book, Refined by Fire, can be yours today for a gift of $25 or more to help Jonathan Bernis and Jewish Voice Ministries take the message of Yeshua to the world, sharing the saving and healing gospel with Jews everywhere and providing desperately needed medical care to the lost tribes of the House of Israel in remote areas of Ethiopia, India, and other nations. Call, write, or order online today with your gift of $25 or more. You'll make a difference in the lives of Jewish men, women, and children. And in return, Refined by Fire will inspire you to overcome life's most difficult circumstances. Call now